All right. And with that being said, it is getting dangerously close time to bring on my next guest. Uh, he is, of course, the author of Varsity Blues, The Scandal Within the Scandal. His name is John Wilson. He is a family man who got swept up in this pay for play allegation situation that involved celebrities. We talked about it at the time a little bit because, typically we don't get too far into that cultural stuff. We talk about a little bit about that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, here's what happened. John got swept up in this deal because they were looking for excuses to move the venue. And as a result, he just happened to be a bystander, so in a lot of ways. And I'm using the word absurd a lot here lately. And quite honestly, I think it would be better to let John tell you himself. We'll talk about what actually happened. We'll talk about his book, Varsity Blues. And then I want to ask him a very serious question. Of course, those of you that have read today's show description before coming in, you know what question I have in mind. But at any rate, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, first-time guest, Mr. John Wilson. John, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And before we say anything at all, how are you today?
I'm doing all right. Thank you, Tim.
All right. Well, definitely glad to have you on. Certainly looking forward to the opportunity to speak with you in regards to everything that's happened, because I think too many people saw the celebrity side of this and had zero level of sympathy for TV stars going to prison. And they really didn't pay close enough attention to the fact that it wasn't just those guys that got caught up in this net, and not everybody belonged there.
Right. I know you make a great point. I think that when this first happened, it did catch national media, and it created national outrage. And I understand the outrage. If I were a parent and my children didn't get into a college because some celebrity bribed a coach or cheated on a test or created some fake profile, athletic profile for someone who didn't play the sport, I'd be outraged too. And there were 30 parents who confessed to doing just that. But I wasn't one of them. And I got swept up for a very different reason into this case. I think you mentioned earlier, my family was used as, pawns to create the hook to justify bringing all the trials from California to Massachusetts. That was really just the outrageous part of this thing. They had overwhelming evidence I was innocent, and yet they charged me anyway because I was that hook they needed to justify bringing the media spotlights related to this high-profile case that could boost their careers to Boston.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think people understand how frequently this kind of thing happens. You're not the first victim of this, but obviously that doesn't really matter so much to you. Here you are in the middle of trying to, for all intents and purposes, just restore dignity and honor to your family and to your name. It's not as if you had a life where you sat back and had everything handed to you and that this was just a minor inconvenience. You fought your way up to building a serious professional career. You had worked hard for everything that you had so that you could have that sense of pride, and you instilled that hard work ethic. And here you end up in a situation where somebody else, because they're being lazy, wants to take all that away from you.
Yeah, I think it was even more nefarious than being lazy. As you mentioned, I didn't grow up with wealth. I grew up in poverty. I lived on welfare with a single mom in the projects of Hartford, Connecticut. I picked tobacco from the ages of 12 to 16, 40 hours a week to help my family scrape by. So I know the value of a dollar. Education changed my life. It enabled me to escape the projects, enabled me to have a great career. And we lived the American dream up until 2019, when I was falsely arrested and falsely accused as part of that Operation Varsity Blues. And, it's been a 7-year nightmare for every single day since that point.
Yeah. And it's not a nightmare that's over yet either. You're not just fighting to restore your family name, but you're having to battle out against media forces, and you're having to fight legal battles against the government still. So you're basically have this three-pronged attack, including Netflix, right?
Yes, we are having to fight three Goliaths at once. If fighting the federal government wasn't intimidating enough, we're also fighting USC for defrauding us, and we're fighting Netflix for defaming us. And what Netflix did was just really outrageous. They created a movie, they called it a documentary, and they released it before my trial even happened. And so they poisoned the jury pool with their 280 million, subscriber base around the world. And what they did in that film was despicable for a number of reasons, but not the least of which is we gave them a warning letter before the film. They pre-announced the film. And we said, look, here are all the facts that make my case different than all the other cases. And we gave them all the legal facts that were out there in the public record. I also voluntarily took polygraph tests for 2 full days with the head of the FBI polygraph program and the head of the CIA polygraph program. And I passed them all with flying colors. I gave them all that information, yet they didn't change a thing. And in their movie, they showed like 9 or 10 other families who confessed to crimes, who had pleaded guilty to cheating on tests, to bribing coaches, and to putting fake profiles and things like that in their children's records. And we didn't do any of those things, but they smeared me by putting me in there literally 25 times in the first 23 minutes, the actor playing me in their movie, which made me look like the worst parent of anyone. And now, after all the charges have been overturned, except for this minor tax issue, uh, they still haven't updated their film. Their film still says, it basically implies that I'm the worst parent of anyone in this entire case. And they smeared my children who were extremely qualified. I'll just give you 2 or 3 examples. My twin daughters, they were 16 when this happened. They studied hard. One of them got a perfect score on the ACT. Fewer than
Wow.
five. Yeah, think about that for a second, right? It's just crazy. There's, fewer than, 1/10 of 1% of the people out there get a perfect score. My son was a national caliber water polo athlete who competed nationally and internationally for 10 years in swimming and water polo. He had a world record, right? And he was on the USC team. And yet, what the prosecutor said, and the movie said, he was an alleged athlete. An alleged athlete. Just think of this kind of stuff. And that's what the government can do to you. And then Netflix took that storyline and took it and put it on steroids and made me look even worse. And it just poisoned the jury pool for my own trial.
Yeah. So, when you sat down and wrote the book, uh, was this as much a way of venting and getting some level of therapy as much as it was trying to get the truth out since nobody else seemed to be interested in doing it?
I think it was in some ways. You're right. It was, maybe some self therapy, but the bigger motivation, as I'm not a writer, I'm a business person, and from my point of view, it was about a platform to get our story out there, to get the truth out there, really for our children. If you think about what the government did, it's bad enough falsely accusing an adult like myself. And I can take it. I've had a lot of bad things happen in my life. I've had a lot of good things too. But to attack my innocent children to help make their case against me is just beyond despicable. And the worst part about this is because the story spread like wildfire in the media and social media, the internet makes my children's scars both deep and permanent. And so I'm doing whatever I can to try and get our reputations back because, if the government can do this to me and a family that's innocent like ours, they can do it to other people too. And I'm sure they have. And this process and the horrible experience we've had, I'm sure is not the first time. And I fear it's not the last time this will happen. So we're also doing this to help at least reduce the odds of this happening again to another innocent family.
Yeah. Yeah, and ultimately, the worst part of this whole scenario is if you finally win all three of these battles. Best case scenario, you get some level of public apology that'll be downplayed, that almost nobody will pay attention to. You'll have the justification of knowing that you have won, but so few people are going to hear that part of it too. I mean,
Yeah.
there's nobody interested in. It's not like Netflix is going to go back and do a whole new documentary showing where they were wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And the government, none of these parties, I don't think, will ever confess to what they did and tell the truth about it. And even though I've been exonerated in the federal court system, all my court charges were overturned by the appeals court. Um, where do you go now to get your reputation back? And
Right.
that's the struggle we have. It happened in day one in this case, or not day one, but in the first month when this was announced publicly. The Boston Globe had a front page article about this case. It was, splashing across headlines across the country. And in their front page article, they said John Wilson from Boston has already been convicted of a felony and some other prior crime. And I said, what? I'd never been convicted. I'd never been charged with a crime in my life. They mixed me up with another John Wilson. There's 15,000 John Wilsons in the U.S., and they didn't even do their own homework, right? So we finally went to them and said, this is crazy. I didn't commit any other crime. And they did put a correction in, but it happened days later, and it was on page 32 as a footnote. So instead of being on the front page, splashed with all the, fiery rhetoric that this case generated, they put a little footnote on, page 30 in the document saying, oh, that was a mistake on the front page. John Wilson has never been convicted of a crime before. And that's the kind of thing that happens here. And even now, when we're trying to get our story out there, it's kind of like a drop of water in the ocean. Our messaging, our voice, our platform versus what the government had and the bully pulpit they had, because literally they had 50 people, and every time someone confessed and pled guilty, they got another opportunity to make the media waves. Every time someone was sentenced, they got a media parade. Every time someone went to prison, like Felicity Huffman or whatever, they had another media wave, and they rode those waves like expert surfers to smear everybody in this case.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that just leads to the inevitable question of exactly how many other people are targeted like this, that get swept up, that are used as fodder in order to achieve their actual goals. And knowing that there are more, have you been able to reach out to anybody, maybe form a bit of a support group, maybe even start to unify and share resources, or is that just something that really doesn't fall into your current strategy, and so you haven't had much time to do it?
No, it absolutely does. I think one of the things I wanted to share with your audience is that all the proceeds from my book are going to charity. For us, this is about getting the truth out there. And one of the big charities that we're giving to is a legal foundation to help fund people who've been falsely accused, help fund their legal costs. Because if they can do it to me, I know they can do it to other people. And I know that this has happened far more often than any of us would ever want. And it should scare every American that the Justice Department can be weaponized for whether it's political reasons or whether it's career gains or even personal vendettas. And that ought to scare the heck out of every honest American. And so we're doing what we can to not only get our story out there, but to help raise money to fund, a nonprofit legal defense fund for people who've been falsely accused.
All right. Well, that's a phenomenal, worthwhile cause, and it's usually a situation where you go through that personally to really help light the fire, to help you understand how desperately something like that's needed. Because I can tell you, John, I just bebopping through my regular daily life, I wouldn't typically put a whole lot of thought into it until that moment where all of a sudden somebody shows up with a warrant. And a lot like in your case, it's not even for me; it's for another Tim Tap, and it's still going to take some time to sort through that mess. And if it's a big to do in the media, it's going to be nearly impossible to get that fixed. So it's just my heart goes out to you and your family, especially given your background and story. And you've had so much success, and it's all been based on your effort and living the American dream, just like you said. And that should be the message that people take from seeing you and the life you provided for your children, and how they became exemplary examples of what hard work can do as well. You've done your job, you've done your part. And it's just so heartbreaking to see somebody else come along and to not only risk that in that mindset for you and your family, but also to tear it down so that you can't even stand as a positive inspiration for other people at a point in time in this country when more and more people desperately need exactly that.
You're right. It's been, devastating at every level, financially, emotionally, psychologically, and they do it on purpose. They grind you down. It's been 7 years. Think about that, a 7 year nightmare. It's destroyed my entire life savings. This case has cost millions of dollars, every penny I've ever saved in my life, right? Just think about how devastating that is. And I have lost my job at the peak of my career for 7 years. Because once you're charged, people assume you're guilty. They don't think that the government has an ulterior motive. They don't believe that the government would charge somebody who's innocent to help achieve some other objective. And so that charging decision in and of itself really devastates your life. And even if you win in the end, uh, it's going to be impossible to get your reputation back. And they know that, and they know that going in, and that's the most despicable part of this entire process. And the reason we know that they knew this in my case is they blocked all of our evidence. They were able to handpick a judge. So not only did they falsely charge me, they were able to handpick a judge to judge shop for him. And this judge is the oldest judge in the federal system in America, 86 years old. He rubber stamped their decisions 98.3% of the time. Think about that. They only let in 1.7% of my evidence. And they didn't just do this once or twice. In my trial, they blocked my evidence and motions 660 times. Think about that. So my daughters, for example, had a perfect score. My twin daughters had a perfect score and a near perfect score on their ACT tests. That was not allowed in. It's like, what? How could that not be relevant to a trial about college admissions? Their own college test scores were not allowed in. My son's certified swim time that proved his high school coach from water polo wanted to introduce that. They blocked that as well. It proved he's one of the fastest swimmers in the entire United States, one of the fastest on the national championship team, USC team. They blocked that. And they blocked 100 examples that USC was giving donor families a boost in admissions through the athletics process. So they basically blocked all of my evidence during this trial with a judge that was just handpicked by them that was extremely supportive. And so the way the process can be managed here, they can railroad you, they can railroad an innocent person. And it was only, thank God, that we had the resources and the fight to go to the appeals court. Most people, as bad as this has been, most people don't have either the grit or the support of family and friends or the money to fight these guys. And we thought long and hard about taking a plea deal because we knew it would take years. It would destroy all of our life savings. And we said, you know what? We would rather fight and leave our kids with a legacy and an inheritance of their honor instead of money. And that's the trade-off. The government forces you to spend every last dollar you have to fight them, even if you're innocent. And it's just a wild, wild west out there where these prosecutors can handpick a judge and basically railroad you through a trial.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the process is the punishment as much as anything else. Yep. Certainly not the first time we've heard that statement be made in the last decade, but in a lot of ways, the story reminds me of another multi-time guest that I used to have on the show fairly regularly by the name of Michael Daugherty, and he ran a lab, and suddenly he found himself afoul of the federal government. They just decided somehow or another he was violating privacy laws. And even though he had documentation that not only was he not doing anything that they were being accused of, but he stood and fought and eventually won. But he lost his business in the process. He lost his home. He lost his marriage because eventually it just became too much of a strain. But he stood firm because he felt like that was the thing to do in an effort to try and keep it from happening to other people. And unfortunately, most people, as you so rightly pointed out, just aren't in a position to stand up and have that fight. It's very heartbreaking to hear this specifically from you, especially given the fact that you're literally talking about information that would have proven the point just being denied. It seems like so many people in the justice system have lost track of what justice is supposed to look like. It's not their preferred outcome. It should be pursuit of truth and then the best overall outcome based on that truth. And it's really a shame. John, I want to give you an opportunity to remind everybody where they can find your book. If you've got any other websites or anything else you'd like to share, feel free to throw those out as well. And if you're inviting people to follow you anywhere on social media, your handles and the platforms they can find you on, feel free to do that as well, along with a final thought after that.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, they can buy the book at any online retailer out there. Amazon.com is the biggest one. And again, the title is Varsity Blues, The Scandal Within the Scandal. There's also a website that gets updated regularly every week. It's called scandalwithinthescandal.com. And that has a lot of our information in it. And we're looking, again, to not only clear our kids' names, but to help make sure this doesn't happen again to someone else. Now, will we be successful in that? I don't know, but if we can at least make a small dent and help improve others' lives and help avoid one family from experiencing the nightmare we've gone through, then it'll have been worthwhile. From our point of view, I couldn't live with myself confessing publicly to a crime I didn't commit, and I couldn't damn our children to a future where I would confess to a crime that essentially said they weren't qualified. That's why I did this. My children were qualified, and I want to make sure that everybody knows that. And we were used as pawns, and the way that our government can weaponize our system of justice to serve their own purposes is despicable and needs to stop. And I'm going to fight at the government level as well to do what I can to see if we can get some changes in this process, whether it's judge shopping for venue to get the case and trial that people want, or whether it's railroading someone through a process that is so outrageously unfair, everything gets overturned, which is kind of crazy, or whether they pile on charges. They piled on 180 years of prison time in my case. Think about that, 180 years of prison time for making a donation. And in the appeals court, the only crime they said we did was my son's swim time was changed by 8%. I didn't do that. Someone made a mistake in it. And do you think about that? That was the crime of the century, that 180 years of prison time for making a donation. And by the way, in our donations, we got receipts from USC. The school gave us a receipt. I said, how can they give a receipt for a bribe? This is crazy. So as you think about this process, it is out of control. It's so disproportionate. I just step back and say, something needs to be done here to, I think, really address our justice system, how it can be weaponized, number one, but really how people can take advantage of it for personal gain in the government. And that needs to stop. And so I think criminal justice reform is an important issue I'll be pursuing as well through our government process.
Absolutely. Well, John, again, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to come speak to us here tonight. I appreciate that greatly. Certainly, that everybody watching here tonight is firmly in your corner, and we're hoping that as you continue the battle, that not only do you get the outcomes that as you so rightly deserve, but maybe a little bit more on the redemption side of things, because you're fighting the good fight in a way that most people don't even imagine would be necessary. So I don't know if it's any consolation to you whatsoever, but you are standing strong as a inspirational figure for those of us who feel like we're powerless. Thank you for what you're doing, because it's not just for you and your family. It literally is for all of us. So thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate the support, and I'm happy to continue the fight.
All right. Well, obviously, as things continue down that road, hopefully we can get together again and continue the conversation, because obviously there's a little more road to go down on this story. So Godspeed to you, and we'll talk again.
Great. I look forward to it.
All right. Thank you much. Ladies and gentlemen, John Wilson. And again, it is absolutely astounding what's happened in his particular case. It's hard to imagine until you take a look around and see where our legal system has got. We literally spend so much time talking about things that are similar to this. Going to let this scroll through one more full time. Scandalwithinthescandal.com is his website that gets updated. And then Varsity Blues, The Scandal Within the Scandal. There is a link to Amazon. And it's just, wow. That's all I can say. Wow.